An important part of living life on your own terms, especially if you're an employed doctor, is the art of negotiation, which unfortunately is a skill not a lot of doctors have mastered. On this episode, we discuss with an anesthesiologist who has mastered the art of physician negotiation, as well as his online business ventures, on this episode of Bootstrap MD. Hey guys, this is Dr. Mike Lumeng with Bootstrap MD. Thank you for joining us on this podcast. I got a really exciting episode today. I got a really cool interview. I met this gentleman at a conference I was at that I think I told you about, called the Physicians Helping Physicians Conference, run by a good friend of mine, Michelle Mudge Riley. And one of the speakers there I really kind of connected with, and I said, I need to get you on my podcast. Very interesting story that I think you guys will really get a lot out of hearing. His name is Dr. Jesse Lopez. And Dr. Jesse, he currently lives in Columbus, Ohio, which is actually the city I was born in, but I moved to the West Coast. Who knows why? But he is a anesthesiologist. And after spending several years in leadership roles in his organization, he's now decided he learned how to create a part-time, work part-time, and now dedicates a lot of his time now into helping young and mid-career healthcare professionals attain what he calls work-life bliss through coaching, blogging. He has a podcast that's really cool that you guys need to listen to, which he talks about financial independence and really an important strategy that most physicians don't know, which is negotiation. He's an alumni of SEEK. He's also alumni of FinCon, and he's also part of the consortium for physician helping physicians. And what I like about Jesse is he's not afraid to go into something new. And it was interesting. I've been involved in online businesses and online marketing since like 2003. And I know Jesse's only been doing this recently. And you know, the amount of information that he gets through and then goes and understands it, and then more importantly implements, was really exciting to me to learn that, you know, a physician's actually doing it and actually doing it quite well. So that being said, without further ado, Jesse, how are you doing?
Hey, great. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
So before we begin, really cool. You were doing this podcast at the time of the recording. You just came back from a medical mission, which I believe you did with Physician on Fire. Is that correct? Maybe you could tell the listeners a little about what you were just doing.
Yeah, that's totally correct. I had a great time. The mission is called One World Surgery, and you can find it at oneworldsurgery.com. And last year, I met up with Leaf, Physician on Fire, at FinCon, and we got to talking, and he was telling me how he was about to go on this mission. He had just come back from a mission. It was in September. And he had such an amazing time. And the thing that was most surprising is he took his entire family. And at the time, he had a 9-year-old, a 12-year-old, and he took his wife. And I was just so inspired by that I decided that I was going to join him to do a mission with him. And I guess he put a call out to action to all his listeners. And myself and one other physician were the only ones to answer that call. It was pretty funny. But I had one of the best experiences of my life. I literally just came back 3 days ago, and I'm still reminiscing over that experience. I'm almost like 99% done with the guest posts that I'm going to put on his website. So if you want to read about what he and I did and the type of experiences we had as physicians, this is going to be a really nice post with lots of pictures. And I'm going to get into the details. So if somebody wanted to do their own mission, it doesn't matter what type of medicine they practice, I guarantee they'll have an amazing experience. Plus, they could take their family.
That's great. I've done a medical mission in the past, and you know, I still look back with fond memories. And what's really interesting is now you actually have the time to do these kinds of things. Now working part time, unless were you doing missions before as full time as an anesthesiologist?
Well, it turns out this was my first mission. I was considering doing one with Surgicorps, and I had to choose between doing Surgicorps this year or One World Surgery. And I went ahead and went with One World Surgery because Leaf did such a nice job on his website explaining piece by piece, what would be expected of somebody if they went on this mission. Whereas the other missions, you show up to a slideshow presentation and you really don't know what to expect. And he did such, plus he was going to be there. So I figured I had a safety net in the unlikely event something would have happened. And if he were willing to do it, then, I had really no excuses. But before that, I really didn't have any intention because I really didn't have any time. Like you mentioned, I had no free time. And so now that I have free time, it's something that I'm going to incorporate into my, yearly life. I'm going to do it every single year. And next year, for sure, I'm going to go again. And this time I'm going to take my kids.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'm a big comic book nerd, comic book geek. I've always been that. And anytime I have a guest on, I'm always interested in their secret origin. How did Clark Kent become Superman? Peter Parker become Spider-Man. So how did Jesse Lopez become this physician, negotiator, blogger, career coach extraordinaire? How did that journey begin for you?
That's what a fun question. I think I've always, everybody has a secret identity, or they have it's funny. I don't think I ever went into medicine. I never really expected to be a physician. It kind of just happened, I think I really gravitated towards more of a creative lifestyle before I went to medical school. I was really, even though I was pre-med, I really was big into the arts. I enjoyed, sculpting. I enjoyed construction. I actually ran a construction company with my father for several years before joining medical school.
Oh, wow.
And, I pretty much, like my call name is Doc of all trades. And the reason why I call myself that is because pretty much anything I find an interest in, I will dive in until I master, or at least get really good at whatever that interest is until it's fulfilled. So, plus, I was a tradesman. I actually ran a plumbing company. I actually got my plumbing license, and my dad and I would do these big commercial projects and residential projects. And so I felt very comfortable with the trades. And so transitioning out of that and going into medicine, it was kind of a shock because I felt like medicine wasn't nearly as creative as even construction, to be perfectly honest with you. And so I think in the back of my mind, I always gravitated to doing something a little bit more interesting. Now, like, they always say with medical school, people fall into one of three categories. They're either excellent clinicians, they're excellent scientists, like the people that do research, or they want to make a lot of money. And I would say I'm probably in the latter. I really went into it. I was, I believe in helping people, but at the same time, I came from pretty humble beginnings, and I really wanted to make some money. And medicine did provide that for me, and for that, I'm forever grateful. And hopefully, in the process, I've helped a lot of people. But at one point, making money didn't mean anything to me anymore, and I just didn't feel like medicine connected with me in terms of my creativity. And, doing the same case or the same type of case over and over again, over 15 years, just started getting really stale. And so then one day, I've tried everything in medicine to try to kind of fulfill this need. I tried, I did try doing research for a period of time, did not enjoy that. I then decided to get into the meat and potatoes of medicine and learn how, in the, behind closed doors, how hospitals ran, how departments ran. And then I started applying for those positions. And the funny thing is, one day I just decided to show up at meetings. So I'm a brand new attending. I said, I think I'm just going to show up at the pharmacy meeting or the Code Blue meeting or the credentialing meeting, just show up to see what happens. And lo and behold, people were pretty happy that I was there. And then from that, it kind of springboarded into various positions, vice chairman, a scheduler, and then ultimately I was running my department probably within the first 6 or 7 years of my medical practice. And from that point forward, I spent the rest of my career either in a meeting or in the OR. And after a while, I just kind of got burnt out. And then I said, it's enough. And I quit. I stopped doing all of that. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed something more creative. And so I stopped running the department. I stopped going to meetings. I stopped following the rules. I kind of got tired of that too. So right now I'm kind of a rebel in my department, and I'm kind of, some people like it, some people not so much. I show up to work, I work hard, I do what I have to do, but I decided to create my own path going forward.
So you're currently still with the same group hospital now, but you're working more part-time, is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much. I went to my hospital and I was very forthcoming with them. I told them that I was no longer interested in leadership and that I really wasn't interested in working full-time anymore. And it didn't really get a very good reception with that. I actually recruited other physicians to go part-time with me. And I made a spreadsheet and a proposal to the hospital to demonstrate to them that by keeping all 4 of us on and reducing our FTEs, they would actually save money. But they were more interested in keeping things status quo. And at the last second, they kind of pulled out of my negotiation and they gave me no option. So from that point forward, I actually resigned from my position. And I was unemployed for approximately 30 days, after which point they called me back and they said, hey, well, what is it going to take for you to stay at your current job? And I said, well, I want to be part-time. So if you can make this happen, I'll be happy to stay and contribute in any way I can. And they slept on it for a couple of days and then they agreed. And so I've been part-time ever since.
So let me just make sure I understand this. So you're now working less hours, but roughly or close to making the same amount of money that you were before?
So no. So basically I went to 75%.
Okay.
So I'm working 75% of my hours and making 75% of my money, which for me is totally fine. Because I've also, adopted the financial independence lifestyle, the FIRE, financial independence, retire early lifestyle. And I haven't even noticed a difference because I've cut my spending by 30 or 40%.
Now, you got a family? How did your wife and react to this?
Very badly. Yeah, nobody likes it. No one likes it when you get used to a certain lifestyle and you cut back. And then my friends and family were like, "Are you okay? Are you sick? Are you dying? What's wrong with you?" To this day, my dad says, "You know what, son? There's nothing more important in life than hard work."
Right.
And my dad's 78 now, and he's like, "I really like to work. I don't know why you don't like to work." And I'm like, "It's not like that, man. I work. In fact, I work harder now that I'm part-time than I ever have in my entire life because, I have my hand in so many different projects, whether it's podcasting, blogging, going to conferences, writing, kind of coming up with new ideas. I am constantly working. I probably put in 14, 16-hour days now, whereas before, I would be done maybe 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, and then I would be done, and I wouldn't really think about it anymore. So if anything, I'm working way harder for a lot less money.
Well, I can share you one advice that someone talked to me about, and don't get me wrong, I believe in hard work, but what one of my mentors told me is that when you go cash that check, he says, no banker or no one from the bank had ever asked him when he's cashing the check is how hard did you work for this money?
Exactly. No, totally. Exactly.
At the end of the day, you're just there about cashing checks. And really what it comes down to is working smarter, which I think what you're doing is much smarter than oftentimes just working harder. Now, another thing that you shared at the conference that we both spoke at is you sought out a mentor. And in this case, it was Michelle Mudge Riley. Can you share your audience what led you to doing that? Because many doctors that I work with, or I've worked with in the past, we're type A. We tend to be control freaks. We tend to want to do everything ourselves. And it can be a big step is to actually asking for help. How was that for you when you actually went and you reached out and found a mentor?
You know what? I always tell, when I mentor people, I tell them, you have to get to a threshold in your life. You have to get to the point of desperation where you have absolutely, you're at the rock bottom. And once you reach threshold, you have to be able to recognize it. And for me, that was, I was already kind of burnt out at work, and I was at working. I was on finishing up a 20 to 30 hours, 20 to 5 hour shift. And just then a big level 1 trauma came in, and, when these cases come in, they really just require all of your attention, and they're very, very stressful. And I just remember I walked out of the OR, somebody gave me a break, and my feet are covered with blood, and the blood's kind of dragging on the floor a little bit as I'm trying to clean it off. And I just then, somebody told me to take a quick break, and I looked at my phone and I got a text, or like maybe a tweet, and it's talking about this guy that retired at 43. And I'm like, who does that, you know? And then I realized that was actually a physician on fire who was retiring at 43. Now, at the time, I was 45 or 46, and I was just blown away. And at that point, I kind of threw my hands up in the air. I said, I need help because I am doing something incredibly wrong. And so I think within a couple of weeks from reading that, I went ahead and signed up for SEEK, the Non-Clinical Careers Conference. And when I went there, I met Michelle. And Michelle just has, her story is so amazing that she was able to quit medicine, walk away, and really just recover from it. It was so inspiring that I said to myself, I have to have her as my mentor. And I just, the second her speech was over, she gave a talk, I went straight to the podium and I just talked to her. And she said, right away we connected. It was just it was just like instantaneous connection. And from that point forward, she's been a great mentor and a great friend.
That's a great story. And, I've also get to meet Michelle Riley. And on a previous episode, for guys listening, you can go find an interview that I did with Michelle. I want to get back to that time where you actually quit your job and those 30 days until they asked you back. What was did you have a plan? What was there a second job waiting in the wings for you? What was it? Or were you just at your ends rope then?
Well, I think the way you got to approach it is, I knew I had alternatives. So I'm an anesthesiologist, we make really good money, and the market, I understand the anesthesia market very, very, very well. I've been a contributor to the MGMA. So I can't remember what that stands for. Do you remember what that stands for? MGMA?
Medical something management association. Right. Yeah.
So I've been contributing to MGMA for years now, right? So I have access to all the databases. So I knew how much an anesthesiologist makes, and I knew geographically where the demand was. And also I've been tracking anesthesia jobs for years, dating back all the way while I was a resident. I knew where the hot markets were. I knew how much they were making. I knew the cycles. So as it turns out, we're in a very good cycle right now. And so getting another job is as easy as kind of walking up to another place, getting credentialed, which can take 60 to 90 days, and then working. Alternatively, I could have done locums anesthesia. I've already have credentials at numerous locations where if this thing were to fall through, I could just basically call them and they can have me working within a week, maybe 7 to 10 days. Now, currently, I have even more credentialing. So I'm credentialed all over Ohio. If I needed to work, if it didn't work out here, tomorrow I could probably go work if I had to, if I needed to.
Now, when you got the call from your old boss, now your current place where you work at here, how long did it take you to kind of make that decision, or was this part of a negotiation skill or strategy that you were playing like 4D chess that they didn't even know about it?
You know what? I'd like to say that I was playing 4D chess and I was I had planned this out. I kind of had a hunch. I'd like to say one of the strategies that I think most people need to employ when they're negotiating is you need to become a linchpin, right? Mm-hmm. You need to basically make sure you are that go-to person in your organization, that once you're gone, there's going to be a void. And so I feel like I filled that void. When people ever had any difficulties in the OR, whether it was clinically, whether they needed, mentoring, or whether they just needed advice, I was always the go-to guy. And so I think the person who was running the department at the time recognized that. And hopefully they recognized that, because once I sent that letter, okay, it was like this giant shockwave through the organization. And I got phone
Mhm.
calls and people were asking me what's going on. Some people avoided me like the plague. They were just kind of,
Interesting.
it was really, really interesting. But I kind of get it. I really had a strong, oh yeah. And then other people, I had nurses, CRNAs, and other physicians that said that they were going to follow me wherever I went. So, which was really nice of them to say. I don't want to, toot my horn and say I'm all that, but I was able to foster really good relationships with people. And, I think that's really what it's all about, is having good relationships. And that's kind of what broke my heart, is I didn't want to lose those relationships. I really, really enjoyed them. So when I got the phone call, it's not like a regular administrator called me. One of the heads of the department, one of the heads of the hospital called me. And so I remember I was at the time, I was skiing with my family, and my wife and I were sitting there, and I'm like, you ready for a big change in your life? And I said, because if this doesn't follow through, we're going to have to do something. And so once I got the phone call, I looked at her, I nodded at her, and I kind of knew what was going to happen from that point going forward. But certainly I didn't plan it out. And that's the other thing. I don't recommend anybody quitting their job just because you got to have a plan, right? Don't just do it for the sake of doing it. I feel very confident that it's just, I didn't just get fed up one day and say I quit. I actually had a very intricate plan that I was going to just execute. And if it worked out, it worked out. If not, I had a decent alternative.
Yeah, we were kind of chatting before we're recording this podcast, and I mentioned about physician negotiation. And you made a comment that most physicians have no clue on how to do physician negotiation. Why did you say that?
So there's two types of physicians. There are physicians who basically, put their head down, give what they're taking, and do their job. And then there are the other physicians who basically drive to work in a Ferrari and have a surgery center built next door to the hospital. Okay. And I'm not saying to be that guy. I'm not saying to be that Ferrari guy, but at the same time, don't just put your head down. You want to basically stand up for yourself, understand the market, and then, know what your market value is. I wrote a blog post about this. I said, you know what? Are you the Tom Brady of medicine? If you are, you should command a higher salary. You should command more resources if you provide more value to that organization. And a perfect example, I got a phone call today from a physician, and the physician just went off on me right off the bat. She's like, "Hey, Dr. Lopez," she's like, "how come you didn't sign up for this compliance stuff?" And I'm like, what compliance stuff? I'm not sure what you're talking about. She's like, well, I sent you several emails. And she's like, I'm going to have to report you to the peer review. I'm going to report you to peer review because you're not in compliance. And I was just taken back. I'm like, oh my God. I said, what, are you a physician? She says, yes. I said, is this how you treat other physicians? I'm your peer. I said, I just don't understand how you feel like you could just muscle me and be short with me and get me to do what you want. And I suspect the reason why she did that is because other people, this is the way they treat all people, all physicians. And I'm like, I'm not going to stand for that. And so I looked her up, and turns out she's only been out of practice for 4 years. Bless her heart, And the thing is, these organizations, they want physicians to be subservient to the bigger organization, especially if they're employed. They want you to be subservient. And they will find the most vocal, staunch anesthesia physician they can find to do their battles for them. They don't want to do their own battles, mm-hmm. And so they'll pay somebody, a medical director's fee to go after us, And so I think as physicians we need to stand up for ourselves. If not by ourselves, collectively, we need to stand up for ourselves.
That's a really good story. Well, maybe she would listen to this podcast and she'll get more insight from you.
I guarantee you she will hear this at some point.
Now I want to kind of transition. So most people, when they're, you're working at 75%, you're going to kind of take it easy. But just the short time that I've gotten to know you, I don't think that's in your DNA. Why did you start, doing coaching and podcasting and getting involved in online ventures? Where did that kind of start?
Well, that's a good question. So I've always been entrepreneurial. When I ran my father's business back in the day, I didn't know how to do taxes. And then one day I just picked up a book and I said, I'm going to do taxes. And I figured it out. So then I started, doing his books, and same thing. I just figured it out. And then I noticed that, I don't remember if I was watching YouTube or what, but I noticed that people were making money online, and I just didn't quite understand it. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. And so my wife and I went to a WordPress conference. And my wife, I got to give her most of the credit. She's the one who kind of pushed me towards online businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I show up to this conference. It was locally here in Columbus. I think it was called WordPress Con, or I don't know what it was. Anyway, I showed up there, and I swear I didn't understand a word these people were saying. They were speaking hieroglyphics to me, Sanskrit. I had no clue. And but the one thing that I did do was, we were there for an entire day, and by the time I left there, I had my first website up and running in one single day. And from that point forward, I made it a point to learn how to do that. And my wife was really upset with me because she's the one who wanted to be a blogger and all this. And and she's still a little sore with me right now. Anyway, long story short, so then I set out, I'm going to do it. I've been reading, I've read a lot, I've done a lot, and I think I've almost got it figured out.
That's great. What I like about it, and I've been working with doctors who are entrepreneurial and they want to start their online business, and they'll either sign up for my course, or they'll learn something that they read about or go to some type of conference, and then I talk to them in 6 months, they still haven't done anything with it. Either they get too busy, or they moved on to the next bright shiny object. And what I think kind of really appeals me to you is that you were saying, look, I went to medical school. I pretty smart guy. I can figure this out. And you didn't just take no for an answer. You kept searching, like, this is how you need to do it. And I think for many doctors, for whatever reason, maybe it's because they don't have that need to change in their life. They're unhappy with their job, but they weren't as desperate as you had mentioned. They didn't want to do something else. I'm not sure what that was, but that's what I admire about you, Jesse, is you actually you went and say, I want to learn how to do a podcast. And then lo and behold, you hold a conference, or you hold a session at a conference teaching other doctors how to do a podcast. It's back to that, do one, see one, teach one that we learned.
That's right, baby. Right? That's right. That's how you do it. And, and there have been I've had a lot of, not mentors, but people who've inspired me along the way. And, every time you hear someone else's story and you kind of can, it appeals to you, you know what I mean? Then, and again, I think universally, all these people had this, we have all the exact same thing in common. We're all afraid, right? We're all afraid to take that next step, to put yourself out there. Even me, I'm terrified. My first blog is still anonymous. I don't go out and tell everybody who I am. And there's really no reason for that. You got to face your fears. And again, over the years, I've had numerous people who've helped me with that. And they've all, even yourself, thank you so much for giving me confidence to even come on your podcast. And in doing so, every day you get one step closer to your goals. It's really nice.
I think it's a good point to end on here. Again, I really appreciate you taking the time. I don't even know that you're even post-call, and we're doing that podcast. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Where can they go and find out more information about either physician negotiation, your podcast? Can you leave us some links where they can find out more information about you?
Absolutely. So a couple things. Number one, my website's called docofalltrades.com with a Z, Doc of All Trades. I also have a podcast, thephysiciannegotiator.com. And then I'm going to be on podcasts as well. So tomorrow I'm going to be on the Fire Drill podcast with Gwen and Jay from millennialboss.com. I could be reached in LinkedIn if you ever want to get in touch with me. And then over the next couple of 3 to 6 months, I'm going to be producing a ton of content. So hopefully I want to put out a negotiation guide for physicians. The more you can understand the numbers, the more confident you'll be with your negotiations. And then I'm working on right now a blogging guide based upon all the courses that I've taken over the past 2 years, and I'm going to do a nice summation. So hopefully that'll help jumpstart people into getting into online businesses. And then I also just started another brand new website with my wife called unpluggedparents.com, and it's a niche site that I'm going to use as a platform to teach other people how to start their own niche site. So lots of stuff is going on, and I'm really excited about it.
Well, when you get some of those things launched, let me know about it, and we'll let our audience know too when it's being released. So again, thank you, Jesse, for joining us on this podcast. And as always, guys, keep moving forward.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks, Mike.